is competition, and you would, I mean, even in families, there is competition among siblings. So there is competition, and the competition sometimes it's inadvertent. So, for instance, you would have a member state setting laws regarding investment and who can invest. And you would have that member state perhaps reserving a certain aspect of trading in that country, or a certain kind of trade solely for its citizens. But then you have an ECOWAS treaty that allows for the freedom of trade, free trade amongst its so there will be the competing interests between that member states in terms of the citizens of a member state, the citizens of another state seeking to make inroads into that particular trade activity. So those kind of competitions exist, and I think it's normal. But the thing of that ECOWAS does is to try and bring some standardization and some trade integration that opens up the space, like we spoke about the ETLS, for instance, that opens up the space and ensures that ECOWAS trades amongst its member states freely, without barriers, allowing Varflay to go to Sierra Leone to trade, allow Josephine to go to Gambia to trade, allow Kofi to go to Nigeria to trade, and vice versa. So that is the ultimate goal, where we will get to that point. But it takes the political will, as well as balancing the will and aspirations of each nation state. And those become the stumbling blocks or the bottlenecks in achieving, some of the objectives of ECOWAS.
But Madam Ambassador, is it true that member states have been tolerant or compliant to these protocols, for example? Have they been compliant to them?
Well, member states,
on the overall,
member states endeavor to be compliant, but like I said, there's always the competing interests. Sometimes a member state really has to balance out the expectations and demands of its citizens, as against relinquishing some of those demands for the supra body, which is the ECOWAS, the ECOWAS community as a whole. And in that regard, depending on what is deemed expedient for a member state, it may decide to comply with some or adhere to some of the provisions of ECOWAS texts or not. And it's a difficult one for a state to do. I want to give you a typical example, for instance, in the country I come from, Ghana, where we have investment laws that are quite clear that there are certain aspects of trade that are reserved solely for Ghanaians. However, we have other ECOWAS citizens who are in Ghana, and by virtue of the ETLS, they want to be able to trade in those aspects of trade that have been solely reserved for Ghanaians. And now Ghana is a party to the ETLS. So Ghana then has to balance that act. So on one hand, you would have Ghanaian traders who would cry out that, why are you allowing other nationals to trade in these goods, because it is meant solely for us? And then it would be up to
the government
of the day to determine what is the balance. How do I also maintain peace and stability? Because sometimes these demands become so heightened that they cause tension, and you have, a few diplomatic rows between member states. But these are the realities on the ground, and it's not always easy. But as we talk more, as we find ways to better balance the competing interests between nationals and non-nationals, I think we will arrive at resolving some of these problems. And I think the vision of ECOWAS as a regional trading bloc is something that would bring enormous benefits to ECOWAS, ECOWAS member states. Because if you look at all of the resources we have within the West African sub-region, be it human capital, we have a huge youth population that is a kind of resource that is almost untapped and which we can unleash for positive for positive gains in ECOWAS. Look at resources in minerals, in forest reserves. There is so much that we have as a region. And when we begin to understand and approach global trade, industrialization, trading amongst ourselves, we would then see how the ripple effect actually goes to the benefit of all ECOWAS citizens. And that's why ECOWAS has moved, if you look in the new vision of ECOWAS, it's moved from an ECOWAS of states to an ECOWAS of the people. So it's a more people-centered approach to what we do. Whatever we do, the question then becomes, how does this benefit the average ECOWAS citizen? And it's on that basis that most of the protocols, the strategies, the texts are developed. How does that translate to your well-being and my well-being? So I'll give you a typical example. We have the free movement of persons. You can come and reside without a visa, enter another ECOWAS member state country for up to 90 days without a visa. What is the flip side? The flip side is that because you have that freedom of movement, it will not only be persons who are law-abiding that will move in and out of member states. You would also have criminal elements that will be moving. In today's world where you have the threat of terrorism, which is so real in our sub-region, you will then have that kind of exposure as well. What does ECOWAS do? We have the West African...
so you have freedom and you have safety issue.
Yes. But when you have the safety issue, you then have to ask yourself, how are we going to resolve that? And then you have an institution called WAPIS, West African Police Intelligence Systems, that plugs all of the ECOWAS member states, their police intelligence, into a data system that allows them to track criminals. So a criminal who seeks to enter Sierra Leone from Liberia or Ghana from Togo can be apprehended. So these things go and they touch the core of our living, our everyday living. The safety we take for granted, the peace we take for granted, like I said earlier, does not exist in a vacuum. It exists because these protocols and these mechanisms and strategies are there to protect us.
But Madam Ambassador, how vibrant are these institutions? Because we still see human trafficking, for example, on the rise. Just before we come to how ECOWAS sources its funding, but how safe are ECOWAS citizens?
Well, ECOWAS citizens are not at as much risk. I mean, it's a global phenomenon. Terrorism is a global phenomenon. I mean, I think recently, a few days ago, we saw in Germany that they had arrested some terrorists that were seeking to overthrow government.
Yeah, 25.
Yes, 25. That is real. That is real. And so their kind of exposure to criminal elements is not peculiar to ECOWAS. I think the peculiarity in it for us is that you see the springing up of these terrorist groups in parts of the Sahel belt of our ECOWAS region. And that is why it's important for us to focus on conflict prevention mechanisms. And that, for me, I dare say, is also because within West Africa, we have a lot of unemployment. We have youth who are idle. They don't have a lot of work to do. And so how do we harness the potential of this youth and use them as a force for good, so that they are not recruited into these terrorist cells that come that come to harm us. So these are the things that ECOWAS talks about, and if you look at the 4x4 objectives of the current administration, it is one of the key objectives that they are working towards, minimizing risk and exposure to terrorist activity, whilst providing intelligence through systems like WAPIS to ensure that as much as possible we are able to rein in terrorist activities so that they don't spill over into the whole of the region.
Okay, Madam Ambassador, let's come to the means through which ECOWAS generates its fund to run these programs. Uh, Before I ask you about the main source of ECOWAS funding, I know that there is this levy of 0.5% rate imposed on goods from non-ECOWAS member states. What about ECOWAS member states?
So amongst the member states, I mean, these levies is collected by the member states and transmitted to ECOWAS. And it's levies that are, if I may use it's pre-financed. So it's not levies that must be generated from within a member state. It's not additional money that a member state should look for and pay a levy to ECOWAS. It's been fashioned out in a manner that the moment goods are entering your borders,
yeah.
whatever duties that you're paying, an element or a component of that duty is paid by importers or exporters goes towards that levy. So it's upfront money that a country or a member state acquires and then transmits to ECOWAS. It's not always been. I think it's one of the most efficient systems of collecting.
You think it is?
Yes, I think it is, because it does not become a burden on a member state. Levies are not a burden on a member state. As I said earlier, it is not money that is generated from within. Like, you don't have to, the member state doesn't have to acquire revenue and out of that revenue seed a part of it to ECOWAS. Upfront, the money is coming to you, and it's been agreed that a percentage of that money goes directly to ECOWAS.
From the traders?
Yes.
Directly from the traders?
Yes, from importers.
Okay,
so
importers.
there is a whole mechanism for arriving at the values. So the values would of course also differ, because it depends on the amount of trade, the level, the volumes of trade going on. That determines how much you would pay. A member state would pay.
Are member states actually complying with this?
Some do, to a large extent. Many of them do. Many of them also struggle with it. Like I said, we are at different levels of our socioeconomic development.
Then I'll ask for my country, for example. Is Liberia in good standing with that?
I'm not sure that any ECOWAS member state, as we speak today, is in total good standing. And
no
so
country, not even in Nigeria.
I mean, you have some of them who pay better, or who pay more regularly.
Based on the economy?
Yes, based on the economy than others. But I think that by and large, many of them make good on their levies as and when they are able to. And what we do is to encourage the member states to pay up their levies, and it's one of the roles of the representation offices across the member states. So the resident reps, seek to remind member states of their duties and liabilities towards the ECOWAS Commission, because that is what also runs the Commission. That is what allows the Commission to undertake a lot of the support that they lend to member states, whether it's technical assistance, whether it's financial resources, whether it's capacity building, in whatever shape or form. Some of the funding does come from the levies that are paid by member states. And of course, we also receive support from international partners.
Can a member state be reprimanded for not complying?
A member state will be reminded to.
Not reprimanded.
Yeah, I said reminded to pay. It's there are no.
So this is where people consider ECOWAS as a, toothless bulldog.
No, I disagree. I disagree with you. I disagree with you because I say I disagree with you because if you look at the strides and gains ECOWAS has made over the years, you cannot call ECOWAS a toothless bulldog. And I would use our own Liberia here as an example. I think Liberia actually put ECOWAS on a pedestal to show that as a sub-region, to a large extent, we were able to rise up to the occasion and provide requisite support to a member state that was in conflict. If you look at recent actions taken by ECOWAS towards countries that have retrogressed into unconstitutional rule, for instance, you have 3 countries that have been suspended from the ECOWAS Commission, and it is when a member state is suspended from a regional body like that, it does have repercussions, and as part of bringing that member state back in line, a lot of mediation goes on, and so with times these things take time, and so with time you would find that we would bring back into the fold member states because they are fully compliant with our protocols on security and governance and conflict prevention mechanisms. And once we do that, and once you are able to appreciate the level of stability that the sub-region has enjoyed so far, I think you would not call ECOWAS a toothless bulldog.
Madam Ambassador, people say it is ECOWAS and not POCOWAS, for example. It's not the political community of West African states.
Yes.
It is economic.
Yes.
But they say ECOWAS has been more political than economical.
Okay, so I gave you a bit of a history to that ECOWAS indeed is an economic community. But by a certain time, we realized that the political instability had become a fetter or a bottleneck to achieving our primary objective.
So the reality, the current day reality defines ECOWAS operations.
The current day reality of the member states?
Yeah.
It defines the reality of the fact that member states need to be in a state in a state of good governance in order for trade to thrive. Have you seen Have you seen any country where trade thrives or flourishes where there's instability? You won't have that. You won't have trade thriving within the state. You won't have trade amongst other states. You won't have investments coming in, and all of those things begin to cripple the economic aspects of that state. And so,
but
for you to
are not
achieve,
formed to be political.
we're
You
not
are formed to
no,
drive
that is
the
why
economy.
we formed the first treaty. As I said, the focus was on the economic and monetary integration of ECOWAS.
Yeah.
The revised treaty, realizing that we've come this far, these are the strides we should have made. We haven't made these strides. Why haven't we made these strides? We haven't made these strides because we see that the political instability is preventing us from attaining our economic objectives. And so we must pay attention to the politics of our sub-region in order for us to make the primary objective work.
But you haven't achieved the economic objective.
Why
then
do you
switching
say,
your attention.
Why do you say we haven't achieved? We've spoken about standardization of some
Sorry. Yeah.
We've spoken about standardization of a number of things. I think just about 2-3 weeks ago, we had a standardization coming up on the digital economy of ECOWAS. That is a major, major achievement where all member states are coming up with clearly defined standards that are applicable to each member state in today's digital economy. And if you understand how the digital economy actually drives the economies of today, you will appreciate that when it comes to achievements of economic integration, that is one of the major strides that ECOWAS has made and it continues to do. You cannot take away from the fact that the ETLS is providing that level of integration on the economic level. And so some of these things we shouldn't take for granted. When we talk about trade liberalization, ask yourself how easy it is for um, border traders to go across the borders to trade. It's made possible because of the ETLS, and the these objectives cannot be attained where there is no peace and stability. So the peace and stability is key, and we should not at all underplay the importance of peace and stability for the economies to flourish.
Okay, Madam Nkrumah, what are the different programs ECOWAS is undertaking in Liberia?
Whoa, so quite a number of programs that ECOWAS is undertaking in Liberia. I think, broadly speaking, we have capacity building, we would have technical assistance, we would have intelligence,
Okay.
intelligence. We would have security sector reform. All of these things are some of the things that member states benefit from, and it's an ongoing effort. Every time you see there's some activity of ECOWAS going on, and these are the things that Liberia or other member states would benefit from. So I spoke about capacity building, for instance. So on the capacity building, you have, for instance, the ECOWAS Gender Development Center in Dakar, where Liberian citizens have benefited, particularly women have benefited from training there. We have the Agric Center in Ouagadougou, where we have Liberians who have benefited from that. We have a lot of capacity building within Liberia, for instance. So recently we've had the security sector reform that has been ongoing for a while, working with Liberia as it seeks to reform its security agencies. These are some of the things that ECOWAS is Liberia is benefiting from. You have the NCCRM on the political, on the stability side, where the creation of an NCCRM here in Liberia, now fully fledged, taking over by the government of Liberia, works hand in hand with other regional NCCRMs to ensure that we are able to monitor the peace and stability of Liberia. We are able.
Is it the early warning system?
Yes, the early warning for the National Coordinating Center for Early Warning Response Mechanisms, NCCRM for short. So these creatures of ECOWAS actually go to maintain the peace of Liberia. We have one critical role ECOWAS has always played in Liberia has to do with elections, for instance.
Which we will come there, because I was at the launch of one, peace and security consolidation at the pavilion.
Yes.
But in terms of youth empowerment and the media, you have ECOWAS Radio, for example. What is it that you're doing there?
Well, the ECOWAS Radio, basically ECOWAS Radio is to provide visibility for ECOWAS programs within the sub-region. And so ECOWAS programs on the sub-region, as well as what pertains in Liberia. One of the critical roles the ECOWAS radio has played is also working towards the peace, maintaining the peace in Liberia. We're doing a lot of work with the UN through the Spotlight Initiative on sexual and gender-based violence. We do a lot of work also to espouse the protocols of ECOWAS for citizens to better understand how ECOWAS affects their daily lives. So these are some of the things that the radio does. Currently, the radio in its form does not have the technical support that allows broadcast across all of the regions. Sorry, all of the 15 member states. But what we are leveraging on now is online radio. Okay. That gives us even beyond a regional scope to a global approach. And this platform is what we're trying to build on and bring more value to ECOWAS Radio as a tool of educating, informing, and maintaining peace in Liberia and in the sub-region. I think that the ECOWAS Radio also serves as that tool that allows member states also, citizens of member states also, to share their views through radio. Radio has become very engaging. Today's radio is not one-sided.
Is it living up to the expectation of the commission?
Of which commission? Of the ECOWAS Commission?
Yeah, the ECOWAS Radio.
It's doing its best, but as I said, ECOWAS Radio was previously UNMIL.
Yeah.
And so when ECOWAS Radio took over UNMIL, they're still in this transition stage of determining the right strategy to go regionally.
Okay.
And I think even as we're talking about that regional approach, in the last couple of years especially, we've seen how powerful online radio is. And I think that ECOWAS Radio is actually positioning itself to do better on the online radio stage, so that ECOWAS radio content is not Liberian focused. Okay. It becomes regional in scope. So currently you see that because we know that there are 3 languages that are spoken in the ECOWAS sub-region. For now we have English and French broadcasts. Okay. We're looking to expand that to cover Portuguese broadcasts so that our Portuguese community citizens are not left out of it. But going back to the question, because you asked the question specifically about the youth. And so we realize that the youth are a huge force, or a potent force in West Africa. And so it's about designing programs that suit the youth, that is attractive to the youth, that allow the youth to feel included in governance process, allows the youth to air their views, because oftentimes the youth are left out of the picture. But we want to create that platform that gives the youth a voice using ECOWAS Radio, not just the youth of Liberia, but the youth within the sub-region. Over 60% of the ECOWAS population is under the age of 35. That tells you that the youth the population of the youth is on a different level for us, and I don't think it's comparable to any other continent.
So it comes with potential,
yes,
but it comes with challenges.
Of course, it depends on how you look at it. The glass can be half empty, it can be half full. So if you see the youth, and I see the youth as a huge resource, it's about how you turn their mindsets, how you engineer their thinking, and get them to unleash their power, their energy into something that is transformative for the region. So I believe very strongly that the youth will only be a challenge if we do not harness their potential the way it ought to be harnessed.
Okay, Madam Ambassador, Liberia decides 2023. What are the plans from ECOWAS angle to ensuring peaceful and transparent elections?
I think that when I was coming to Liberia, one of my first mandates was to ensure that my eyes were firmly on the ground in terms of Liberia's elections in 2023. And so I've worked very closely with the National Elections Commission, formally and informally, to ensure that Liberia's elections, particularly at this time, is as free, fair, transparent, and peaceful as possible for a number of reasons. The first reason being this is perhaps the first election post conflict where Liberia will be conducting its elections on its own. UNMIL is no longer in the picture. It's a test for Liberia's maturing democracy. Secondly, 2023 elections also presents us with a situation where Liberia is transitioning from an OMR to a biometric voter registration, which again is something new in Liberia, has not been done before, and therefore requires assistance and support to walk with Liberia or NEC through that process. NEC is independent in its mandate, and so we will offer support and assistance where we've been asked to. And I'm happy to say that NEC has continually relied on ECOWAS to support NEC during elections, before, during, and after. And ECOWAS has always stood by NEC when it comes to elections. 2023 is not going to be any different. NEC has asked for, requested for some technical assistance, and ECOWAS will be holding itself in readiness to provide that kind of support, leveraging on experiences from other countries who have already tried and tested the BVR, and how, learning from the challenges and the best practices to bring that to the fore. So in that regard, Liberia has an advantage because it has other countries that it can learn from, and not fall into some of the pitfalls that these other countries went through. So I'm looking forward to peaceful elections. The process of getting to that, the roadmap is critical. And so as we move into the BVR or transition into the BVR, it's important that all actors come together to support the process. For media, for instance, it will be important for you to provide your platforms for the needed engagement and education of the citizenry so they better appreciate why are we going BVR, what is the importance of BVR, what are the requirements of BVR, how do we get to that point. So the civic and voter education, which is the core mandate of NEC, I see more as a shared responsibility. Media has its role to play, and I am sure that ELBC, as we talk now, will be one of the platforms that NEC will leverage on to provide the much needed civic and voter education as we head into 2023.
And you've been holding some dialogues along with other international partners.
Yes.
How is it going?
It's going. We held the launch in October.
Yeah.
We're supposed to hold monthly dialogues. Actually, from here, I'm going to the Chinese embassy where the next dialogue will be taking place. The Chinese embassy would be talking about sustainable international cooperation, and other diplomatic missions in ensuing months will also talk on different topics.
Any reason for that?
The reason is this: international partners and diplomatic missions believe that they also have experiences that can be brought to bear on Liberia. And so through bilateral or multilateral arrangements and platforms such as what has been initiated by ECOWAS and the German embassy, what we seek to do is to have a bouquet of topics that different diplomatic missions select depending on the experience that they have had. they present these experiences, and then you have a counterpart experience or perspective from Liberia. And from that, we generate a conversation where we're able to determine for ourselves how these experiences and perspectives come to bear on the particular topic that we would be engaging in. What are the lessons that were learned by our international partners? What can Liberia also learn from that? What are the differences? What are the challenges that prevent Liberia from probably emulating some of these experiences? And how do we overcome those challenges? As they say, experience is the best teacher, and it's not just the person who experienced it, but also the person who experienced it, the ability of that individual or that entity to share the experience for the benefit of a second person, and that is what we're seeking to do. I think ultimately it is to also show the experience where peace is maintained, peace is sustained, and it becomes an everyday effort on the part of everybody, not just government, but on the part of citizens as as personal entities or citizens as corporate entities. How do we all plug into the shared civic responsibility of maintaining Liberia's peace and transforming Liberia through its vast resource of human capital and natural resources to catapult it into development?
Okay, so if you just joined us, you're listening to the Super Morning Show on ELBC Radio. My name is Varflay Kamara, and my guest this morning is Madam Josephine Nkrumah. She's the resident representative of the ECOWAS Commission in Liberia. So if you want to be a part of the program, if you have some concerns, you can call us on 080-514-096, 080-514-096, or 0770581886, and briefly speak with the ECOWAS ambassador. Madam Ambassador, I understand that you have some engagement at 10 o'clock. So
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock?
10 o'clock, sorry.
10. Ah, okay. But you can interact with Liberians briefly before you go.
That would be great.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. What's your name?
Okay, this is Ed Lauren Bobo calling you from Lofa Country, Foya District.
Let's hear you.
Okay, first of all, let me appreciate the ambassador for her expose this morning. Because, like, when we say ECOWAS water, we know how Nigerian, Ghanaians, Venezuelans lost their life here. But, like, 2023 is coming for our 12 years to take it back. Are they going to come in numbers so that they can protect our borders? Thank you so much for hosting the ambassador. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Call us on.
You have to explain.
I will do that. Call us on 080-514-096, 0770581886, 080-514-096. We can take a call and then go back to the ambassador so that she can respond to these concerns. But if not, then let's take this one. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. What's the name?
My name is Mustafa Jilo. I'm calling from Liberia County, District.
Let's hear you.
Yes, I want to know whether they have any identity for the ECOWAS member states for the population to travel freely.
Okay. Thank you. So, Madam Ambassador, the first caller was appreciated ECOWAS for the time during the ECOMOG.
Okay.
And also he's concerned about, he called from Lofa County. He's concerned about if you will have, security people on the ground to man the borders as we go through our elections. And secondly, he's asking, the second caller is asking if you have some level of identity as an ECOWAS citizen.
Okay, so Liberia is not in a state of conflict. We're going through elections. Elections will be, we anticipate elections to be peaceful. And so there will not be security forces from other member states manning the borders. We'll, however, have observer missions here.
Okay.
Observer missions from domestic observer missions, international observer missions, including ECOWAS. And so that is what we would have, but not necessarily security personnel to man the borders. I'm sure that between the Liberian National Police and other security agencies, they are competent enough to do that.
Let's hear lastly from this person. Good morning, Jible Yinswa.
Good morning, Varflay. How are you?
I'm fine.
And thank you. Let me say good morning to the diplomat in studio. This is P. Jible Yinswa. Varflay, quickly, let me appreciate the ambassador coming to the nation broadcast to discuss and explain the diplomatic mission of the Economic Community of West African States in Liberia. But quickly, your question. I wrote an official diplomatic note to the Commission regarding the 2001 protocol that ECOWAS disagree for a military government to take power or seize power. So they always condemn that. And a couple of months ago, years ago, there were a proliferation of coup in the region, like Guinea, Mali, and the rest of them in Burkina Faso and Togo. And I wrote that communication to the Commission and that they need to revisit that protocol of 2001 to go beyond that, so that the sitting president will not revise the constitution of 2 terms to make it with 3 or 10 terms, like for example in Guinea, for example in Arcos, Alassane Ouattara revised the constitution. So what ECOWAS is doing, but I know that we're written to them, then let me appreciate the Ghanaian ambassador in Liberia who invited me to a meeting.
Okay.
More to that, what is the effort ECOWAS is doing to build the capacity to improve the young people in the ECOWAS region? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Madam Ambassador, you can just briefly,
Okay. Yeah. So the one who spoke about the identity, I think under our free movement of persons, the most ECOWAS passport, member states passports that are issued as ECOWAS passports, and that's what allows us to travel freely amongst the member states. So that is the identity. The second one, the second gentleman spoke about the 2001 protocol that seeks to prevent unconstitutional power.
Yeah.
And it is flowing from that protocol, for instance, that you currently have member states of Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso suspended because of coup d'etats, so that an unconstitutional takeover. So these are steps that are concrete and real that ECOWAS is doing to prevent or deter other member states from going down that route, and for us to appreciate the importance of democratic governance and to go through the ballot box to remove a certain president from power. So do it constitutionally. I think, have I answered the questions? And somebody spoke about the youth.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's so much ECOWAS is doing. In fact, because we're having this conversation, I couldn't talk about all of it, but I can just state some of the programs here.
Yeah.
So ECOWAS has an ECOWAS Girls of Excellence program for young girls.
Okay.
ECOWAS has a program on fistula. ECOWAS has a volunteer program here, so we have volunteers that come amongst the member states. That it's an exchange program. You go, you learn by volunteerism. You're paid, and you benefit from the experience that you bring to bear in your home country. We're supporting Liberia on its tax transition to the value-added tax system. As I said earlier, we're providing support for the National Elections Commission before, during, and after. We also provide support to civil society through our emergency response mechanisms for elections. We've provided support through the West Africa Health Organization, WAHO, to the Liberian government when we had the 2 major pandemics. Currently providing support on security sector reform. I mentioned that in collaboration with an institution in Switzerland, we're doing a lot of work with the Small Arms Commission by providing training for the military and paramilitary on fiscal security and stockpile management in collaboration again with the German government. We've established the NCCRM, I spoke about that. We have an ECOWAS advisory technical team that sits and works with the AFL, the Armed Forces of Liberia, providing ongoing technical and capacity building and direction to AFL, supporting them in that regard. I spoke about the Gender Center in Dakar already, where they work very closely with the Ministry of Gender here in Liberia. And most importantly, our diplomatic role in peace building.
Okay.
A lot of the things that you do may not be in the forefront or in the public space, but a lot of what goes on, there's a lot of work, engagement, formal and informal, to ensure that we help consolidate the peace of Liberia.
And as a member of the ECOWAS Trade Journalist Network, Liberia, I will pray on, your office to include us in some of your programs so that we drive the message of trade in Liberia.
That's an excellent suggestion. And
Yeah.
After this meeting, I'll be happy to meet with some of your journalists, and
Okay.
then we can, engage further and see how we can build a strong partnership. So, because without the media, we cannot do all of the work. We need media to create the visibility. We need media to inform and to educate. So I look forward to that engagement and that collaboration.
Madam Ambassador, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. The U.S. Ambassador has sat in the CDUI, the Chinese, the EU. So I thought to end with home, ECOWAS. But I thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Varflay. It was a pleasure engaging you, and I look forward to further engagement.
Thank
I
you.
wish your listeners a pleasant day as well.
Thank you so much. Well, she's ECOWAS Ambassador to Liberia, Madam Josephine Nkrumah. She's been here as my prime guest on the Super Morning Show. Coming up very shortly, I will be speaking with folks from Breakthrough Action about the one